What's not to love about American Giant? American made, jobs for Americans, and they're manufacturing top-notch clothing with that good old American craftsmanship. They're also doing great things with the Rescue 22 Foundation. American Giant came up with this limited edition Rescue 22 Classic Full Zip Hoodie to help fund a service dog for a veteran in need. You can snag one on their website, american-giant.com. American Giant believes that work and building up American manufacturing communities brings purpose, and purpose results in a better product. If you need quality clothing like jeans, t-shirts, and sweatshirts, check them out at american-giant.com/Jack and get 20% off with discount code Jack at checkout.
This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr.
Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My guest today, Matthew Thomas. He is a chief deputy sheriff under Sheriff Mark Lamb in Arizona and has served in law enforcement for over 30 years. His book, Interceptors, The Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartels, is available right now. You can find it at onetimenation.com, and you can follow him on Instagram at deputy_onetime. Here is Matthew Thomas. What's up, man?
What's going on, dude?
Hey, look at the background. Nice.
Hey,
Your book got the red.
What's that
yeah,
right
there we go. Similar backgrounds today. Look at that.
Yeah,
nice. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll just hop right in. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Dude, I got to tell you. So the super fan that I know that goes to my gym, I run into them this morning. So I hit the gym and then I hit the store. I see him at the store afterwards and he's like, bro, I'm getting a tattoo. And I said, all right, cool, man. What are you getting? I'm getting the tomahawks.
No
and
way.
I was like, right on, dude. So I told him, I said, hey, man, when you go do that, like, let me know so I can get some video or picture or whatever and send it your way.
No way. That is awesome. Maybe after this, if you can find out his address or something, I can send you a signed book or something to give to him or whatever.
Oh, that'd be dude. Yeah. He would flip over that because he tried to get into your book signing here in Scottsdale and he didn't make the cut.
Oh,
and
that was a busy one.
He was so bummed, man. Yeah.
Dude, oh, that's awesome. Well, please tell him I said what's up when you see him, and then I'll get a book over to you to give him or something like that, or whatever is best. Man. That's awesome. That is awesome. So, what are you doing? Are you still working? Are you retiring? Are you like you're going strong? Like, what's up?
Dude, I'm still working. This is kind of I'm kind of making a push. My last couple of years, just I'll probably go because the sheriff is running for Senate, right?
I saw that.
When he took his position as sheriff and he bumped me up to his second in command,
wow.
I told him, I said, hey, man, I'll do 2 terms. And that's enough for me, man, because I hit 30 years in April.
Dude.
And so, So I told him I'll probably be out. So it works out well, though, because he's running for the Senate seat. If he gets that seat next year, he'll leave in, December 31st would be his last day in office as sheriff. And then he would take his office, his Senate position. And he's offered me to come with him and be his state director, which essentially equates to running. He has 3 offices here in the state. So running those 3 offices while he's in DC. So it'd be a good transition into that and a good resume builder.
Man, that's serious. Yeah. That's crazy. Well, so how does it work then? Does someone have to run for sheriff?
Yeah. So initially when he decided for Senate, he was like, hey, bro, you're up. Like, you're the obvious choice, right? You're number 2. It just makes sense to put you in. And I was like, yeah, dude, but like, I'm done, man. I'm at the end. Right. And I don't think it serves the community, the agency or anything. Cause I said, if I do it, I'm not going to stay a full term. I'll leave midterm and hand it off to somebody else. And I said, why do that to the agency and everybody else? Let's just pick somebody. And so we had a lieutenant internally that we knew was kind of interested. Good guy, good head on his shoulders, good vision, same values and everything. And so we pulled him in and we said, here's the deal. This is hush hush, but the sheriff's going to run for Senate. And this was probably 8 months ago. And he said, all right, I'm in, I'll do it. So we have an internal guy running for sheriff, and with Mark's backing, he should just landslide victory because everybody just loves Mark in this county. I mean, all over they love him, but the county, he's really strong. So that's kind of the plan. And then that guy actually asked me, he said, "Hey, would you be willing to stay in your position like 6 months or a year into my first year of sheriff so that you can get me up and running?" So I said, "Yeah, that's an option as well." So I said, "Let's just figure it out when we get into 24. About this time next year, we'll know what everything looks like, what the landscape looks like, and that'll give me a good feel on what exactly I'm going to do." But I'm looking like the end of 24 or into 25 will be I'll be at 32. So I'll punch out.
Man, you've been busy. You got a lot going on. And for people that don't know, sheriff's department, police, when you're talking about law enforcement, can you run down difference between a sheriff's department and a police department for people that are like, "Oh, I think I know, or I saw something on Longmire about it," or whatever. like what's that? Like you're running for office, but then how about the people underneath? And then like what's the breakdown there?
Yeah,
And what
so
attracted you to a
big
sheriff's
difference
office?
The big difference is a sheriff's office is obviously run by a sheriff. He's the head of the agency, and a sheriff is an elected official. So the people have elected him to do that job, and he's responsible for the entire county, and essentially becomes the lead law enforcement agent for that county, with the most authority over that county. And the cities fall within that county. They have their own agencies and they have their own chiefs. The big difference between sheriffs and chiefs are appointed by either city councils or town councils or city managers. So that's an appointed position chosen by the city itself. And if you get down into the weeds of it, a lot of people recognize the authority of the sheriff because the people have placed him. And when you're talking constitutionally, chief of police may not get that same level of recognition because they've just been placed. And so people could say, okay, well, that chief only shares the views of what his city council is telling him his views are. Whereas a sheriff can say, these are my views and this is my stance, such as our sheriff. And if the people don't agree with that, they will vote me out of office and I'll be out of a job. But if the people in my county agree with that, then I'll be reelected until they don't agree with that. And that's one of the bigger differences. Everything else pretty much functions the same. We have the same type of units. Like we have an aviation unit, a K-9 unit. We have specialty squads. We have SWAT. We have search and rescue. And another thing for sheriff's offices, we are mandated to do a couple of things. And those things are the jail. We have to have the jail. We have to have search and rescue and civil service. So serving civil papers. Those are three things that the law, at least in Arizona, mandates the sheriff's office do. Everything else is kind of extra, the patrol and all that goes along with it.
Man, how about like history of sheriffs versus police departments, especially in Arizona? I mean, people think Tombstone, they think all these things. What's the history of that is always been fascinating to me, and how it evolved into what it is today, because it is a really unique position when you think of government as a whole. And it's just it's the sheriff stands out as someone very different from any other law enforcement or even military type of an organization out there. What's that history, even if it's Arizona or across the country?
Well, across the country, we have about 3,000 sheriffs across the country, and it is a very historical position. And because of the movies and how it's been become popular, like in movies like Tombstone with Wyatt Earp, and that being here in Arizona, we have 15 counties. And so we tend to have large counties. Like our county is 5,400 square miles. So that's 5,400 square miles that we're responsible for with our personnel. And all the other counties are similar size. And so most of the history goes back into the beginning of the country. Like our county was formed in 1875, so we've had sheriffs since then. And the history of the sheriffs is crazy. Like I'll give you a little story. One of our sheriffs, and so my position is chief deputy, so I'm second in command to the sheriff. I'm chief deputy. Some places call that under sheriff, so same equivalent. But in our history of our sheriffs, back in the early 1900s, one of our sheriffs and his chief deputy, i.e. second in command, got into an argument at a bar on Main Street in one of our small towns and got in a shootout. And the sheriff ended up killing his second in command after an argument in a shootout. And so it really is out here, the wild, wild west. And we have a strong Western tradition with our sheriffs. And you'll see a lot of our sheriffs rocking the cowboy hats. And we have cowboy hats out on patrol. So we really hold on to that tradition. And I think it's a very strong tradition of representing and being a representation of your community, right? So we have, like, if you look at the demographics of our agency, it almost exactly mirrors the demographics of our county. And so they are true representatives of their community, and they just happen to be serving their community as a deputy sheriff. And there's a lot of pride in that whole deputy sheriff title. And I can tell you, I don't know about the rest of the country, but I can tell you here in Arizona, when the sheriff shows up, when the sheriff's office shows up, especially when you're dealing with real bad guys, like bad guys, there's a different level of attentiveness. I would say when you show up and there's bad guys. I've showed up to scenes before where city cops are getting just cussed up and down, and the person is just being awful to them, and we pull up and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, why'd you call the sheriff's office? All right, we'll settle down, we'll behave. So there's a different level of respect, and I think they understand that the sheriffs are very firm, very fair, but we won't tolerate, behavior like that, and we keep our community safe, and we are very focused in doing that. And I think we just get a different level of respect, and I think a lot of it has to do with that history of the office.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a little bit the power of popular culture as well. Just watching shows as a kid, maybe not so much today. Cause I don't know if people watch, as a kid growing up in the 80s, you still would watch some Westerns, on reruns and that sort of a thing. So
Matt Dillon,
you still watch all these different shows that had the sheriff showing up. And I think for at least people that are my age, my generation, like that's in there somewhere. That's just in this foundational element that was put there by popular culture, whether it's comic books or it's TV shows or it's movies or whatever else. So I got, had that sense growing up as well. And, I can't point to anything specifically except for popular culture that would have put that there. And of course that popular culture is tied to history, which is whether it's inspired by or, it's a legend or whatever it might be, but it's still a very, very cool organization that's so unique, I think, to especially to the American West, which is very cool.
And to your point, Arizona, we have Old Tucson, which was an area where they filmed a lot of those Westerns. And we have an area in our county where they filmed a lot of the Westerns. And we're talking like the John Wayne days. And John Wayne actually has a ranch, or had a ranch in our county, and has several ranches throughout the state that were his. So we have a deep history. Geronimo was here, so we have a very deep Western, I don't know, just deep history with that stuff. And to your point, the Western sheriffs that were portrayed when you and I were young, that is very much a pushing factor in how people view the sheriff himself and sheriff's offices.
Yeah. And I love when your sheriff posts pictures. He's got the cowboy hat on, he's got the shirt tucked in, no wrinkles, got the body armor over the top of it, has the badge going, the leather, got the leather rig. Yeah. It's like,
he's got the different Longmire look going.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I love that. I have so much respect for anyone who steps up to get in law enforcement, because it takes a special person to do what you do. Very different than I don't think I would be very good at it. But I like the just having the mission. Maybe certain aspects of it, maybe on a SWAT type deal. But man, it's just rough, especially now. But how did you get it? What was your path in?
So really, my path in was in my grandparents, my grandpa and grandma on my mom's side were both World War II vets. That's actually where they met, and then they got split up for a bit, and then they got back together. And so growing up, my grandpa was really my father figure, and just watching him come from an era of service and dedication to country, that kind of instilled in me the patriotism, the service to others. and I watched him growing up, and I just, I admired every bit about him. And so I think that gave me my heart to serve. And then as I became a teenager, just out of high school, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And my now wife of 30 years and I were dating back then. And lo and behold, she was pregnant. And so she, at 19 years old, both of us are faced with growing up very quickly. And so at that point, I decided I have got to do something, and government work looked very appealing. I knew I wanted to serve law enforcement or military, and so I started applying for all the agencies around this area. And Pinal County was the first one to give me a call. I went through their process first, and they gave me the job offer. And at 20 years old, I started this career.
That's a lot of responsibility at 20. What was that training like?
So
what was the application process like? Did you have to you have to do obviously background check, but were there polys back then?
Yeah, they did polys, they did everything. So you go through your initial application process like anybody else, right? You're putting everything down, and they obviously they ask a bunch of extra because they've got to get into your any criminal history, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so as you go through the process, you have to do a psychological exam, you have to do a poly. You have to do written exams. You have to do memory exams where they flash pictures, and you have to, see that picture, and then you have to recreate in your mind. They'll ask you questions like, "Okay, you just saw a picture of people on a bus. What was the guy in the third row wearing?" Stuff like that. So recalling and being able to show your mental acuity, and then there was physical tests. So you finish all of that, and then you are ranked. And by your ranking is how you get offered, right? So they have 5 positions, and you're ranked 6. You're not going to get an offer. Wow. So it was really competitive back then, and there was a lot of people jumping into it. And this was '93 when I got in, and so there was a lot of people going for the same spot. So it was pretty competitive, and so you had to really work your tail off to get in there. And once I got in, it was really culture shock for me, because I had come from, growing up, I grew up in a rough area. My mom was a single mom. My dad left at a very early age. We were in Section 8 housing, government subsidized housing, as a single mom trying to make it. So you can imagine that that was a little bit of a rough area, surrounded by gangs. And so I came up in that culture with also, on the flip side, I had my grandfather who was very stable family. And so I was immersed in 2 worlds. Mm. I had the world at home as a kid, playing with my friends, with gangs around, people getting shot, all that kind of stuff. And then with my grandparents, we're hunting and fishing and family get-togethers. And so when I went into law enforcement, what I guess I'm getting to is I didn't have a very structured life. I was just kind of all over the place. And when you get into law enforcement, it's paramilitary. And so you start dealing with structure and starting, just learning about the rank structure and the nuances of being in a paramilitary organization and everything that goes along with it. And so having to maneuver all that was all drinking from a fire hose the first couple of years, learning that.
I bet. Is there do you have to do post, or how does it work like that side of it?
Yeah, so you go through an academy, and the academy again is paramilitary. So
is it
they
specific
run it like
to the sheriff's department?
So mostly, like in Arizona, and I don't know, different departments have different methods, mm-hmm. right? So the bigger departments tend to have their own academy. Bigger meaning like the Phoenix PDs, the Tucson PDs. Mm-hmm. So when you have those major metro areas, they tend to have their own. Because they're pumping so many people through. Okay. The rest of the state, we have regional academies where it's a conglomeration of a bunch of different agencies that are pushing their cadets through. Mm. And so you go to an academy like the one I went to, I was with probably 15 other agencies. So guys and gals that were going to be cops from 15 other agencies from around the state. You go through, and it's set up. So you're assigned a squad. You have a squad leader. That squad leader is one of your classmates. That squad leader reports to what is called an RTO, or recruit training officer. That RTO is already an officer, been an officer for a few years, and they kind of guide your squad. And then the RTOs report to a class sergeant. That class sergeant is running the entire class, and then usually that class sergeant reports to an academy commander who runs the overall academy. And so you have that structure, and you're starting to learn kind of the rank and the command structure. And it's a very boot campish. So every day they're yelling at you, waking you up, throwing things down the hallway, throwing things around your room. You're having to get out on the tarmac, do PT. You have to do defensive tactics. Then you go into the classroom. You're having, law and history of policing and all this stuff pumped into you. So, and you get weekly tests that you have to pass. And it's a pass or fail kind of thing. So if you fail, I think now it's if you fail 3 times in a row, you're done. You're out of the academy, and you have to give it another shot. So they're big on the academics because obviously, knowing the law, knowing the case law, that all matters, and it's all significant, especially when you're talking about constitutional rights of people and the ability for me to take those away. And so it's that, man. It's just classroom getting beat down, and then they start, much like a boot camp, at the end of that, or about the halfway point, they start building you up, right? And because you can't do anything right the first month or so, and then they start building you up, and they start forming you into what is going to be a street cop ready to hit the street. And at the end of the academy, you've usually lost some weight, got some better eating habits. You're kind of regimen.
I might need to apply.
Dude, you and me both. It's been a minute. But that's it. Then you hit the street. And when you hit the street, you go back to your agency and your uniform. And I got to say, badge pinning is one of the big things, right? So at the academy at graduation day, like for me, my wife pinned my badge. And so badge pinning is a big ceremony. So you're gaining your badge, and essentially that's giving you your new identity now as a cop. You are now official. You have your badge, and you're in, ready to hit the streets. And then the training starts all over again. And you go through FTO, which is you have a field training officer that you're assigned to. And typically you spend about 12 weeks with a field training officer out on the street, and it's kind of OJT. So you're going to calls for service. They're giving you guidance, and more. In the beginning, they're kind of handling it. You're watching. Then you start to switch roles where you're handling it and they're watching. And then you get to the last phase where they're basically in plain clothes and they're staying back by the car, and you're handling everything by yourself. And they're just there as a safety net in case. And then they sign off on you and they say you're good to go, and you enter a very scary world all by yourself.
Dang, dude, that is amazing. How much did you find, or have you ever thought about this? How much is the academy battling against preconceived notions based on things people have seen in Hollywood, like police officers doing on film? Is that something? Is that not an issue? Because if
I would say it's becoming more of a thing, right? Because our society now is so open. Like you can damn near YouTube anything. And so I think that does influence, but I also think it's not a bad thing. I think it's positive, because there was this sense of secrecy, right? When I went to the academy, I had no idea what to expect, and neither did anybody else. And we had people leave the first day, where at the end of the day, they just snuck out the back door and, took their stuff and left because they couldn't handle it, because they were getting yelled at. They were getting their stuff thrown around, all that kind of stuff. And I think in that sense, it helps a little bit, because people can look up like, what's a police academy like, right? And they can get some snippets of what it's going to look like. So I think it gives them a little bit of, in their mind, a little bit of, okay, I know what this is going to look like. I know what they're going to do. But then I know, if you continue to watch progression of academies, that at the end, it's a design, right? Just like the military, it's by design to wash you of your old and make you new.
Yeah. I was curious, like, let's say the Shield or something like that,
God.
or like walking up, looks like you have a busted tail light, like that sort of like Hollywood type stuff. Or is that just kind of like wiped out early on because now you're in a professional organization? And
yeah, you try to wipe that out, and you actually use examples like that. Like, okay, these are examples of horrible policing, right? And this is not the norm. This is a Hollywood spin. So I can tell you from a 30-year cop, I just hate when they show it's just a drunk, disheveled cop, and he sleeps on the couch in his clothes, and he gets up the next day in the same clothes and goes out and works, and because people think that's the norm, like all cops are just bums. They beat their wives and they're drunk all the time. And it's like, come on, man, that is not us.
You might see that I collaborate with Ironclad on a lot of different projects. In fact, I have worked with them on my book trailers, this podcast, as well as a few other exciting endeavors that are currently in development. Ironclad teams up with some of the biggest brands in the world to create dynamic films, series, podcasts, and ad campaigns. If you are a brand or individual looking to elevate your content or start a podcast, don't hesitate to reach out through their website. This is ironclad.com, and make sure you follow them on all major platforms at This Is Ironclad. Same thing, when I stepped into publishing, I was very aware of films and books that started with the vet on the couch, waking up hungover or still drunk and stuff, like just dysfunctional from the get-go. And so that wasn't, not my thing. But anyway, it's so it's very similar. It sounds similar to what you're saying right there. But interesting, the old the drop in the bag. Oh, looks like heroin, Gene.
Yeah. Now, I can't say that there are times when that took place, right? And there are those little snippets are there for a reason. And you look back at like Serpico. That's an old school movie. And that's a thing that really happened, right? And so I think when you look back through the history of policing, you have to pay attention to stuff like that. And when you look at current pop culture, because you have to know what you're up against. Yeah. And so, as a police officer trying to have influence in my community, especially with the youth, you have to pay attention to what they're paying attention to. And you have to be able to have discussions that say, hey, like that's not real. Or, if it is real, you take some of the incidents over the past couple of years that have sparked controversy throughout our nation. You have to acknowledge those, and you have to say, yes, there's a problem, right? And we're going to try to address those problems, and we're going to do the best we can. But at the end of the day, police as a big umbrella, the cops are good people. We're people doing a job. Just like you and your guys. I know. When you guys flew all over the world and took care of bad guys, there's this mystique and there's this, people imagine what it is like and what you're about. And then you add a little bit of pop culture in there. And then all of a sudden they have already figured out who you are, but that's not really who you are. We suffer the same thing. Yeah.
Do you use some of those things as case studies? Like what was the one, and obviously, when you're making a Hollywood movie or writing a book, if everybody's, you have to introduce tension and have a story arc and do all these things. So without some sort of conflict or, it's not much of a story. But was it the LA County Sheriff's Department in the 90s that had the big, huge scandal? Those guys, like it was a large group. It was most similar to The Shield that came out maybe a decade later. Plus later than anything else.
I think that was LAPD. You're probably talking about the crash unit. So the crash unit, the gang unit there in LAPD, they had some issues and they ended up disbanding that unit because of that. The Rampart unit. It was pretty bad. And we've even recently there's been some big agencies that have found that they have their own gangs in their department, and it's units that have secluded themselves and done stuff that you're talking about, where they are going outside of their outside of the law, really, to accomplish their mission. And those type of things, you really do have to be able to counter those, because it's just one of those stories blows up, and you know how it is. Then all of a sudden, everybody looks at you like, right, you guys are horrible. And you're like, dude, that is not all of us,
Right. It's unfortunate those kind of stories make the best television.
Dude, I know. Well, Training Day. So, I did undercover work, and my wife and I watched Training Day, and she's like, is that really what it's like? I'm like, no, that is not at all what it's like. No.
Great movie, though.
Yes.
Exactly.
It was a great movie. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the difference, to telling a story with conflict in an hour and a half or 2 hours, or a 8 episode season or 12 episode season of something, versus real life, like getting the call and going there and doing the job and coming home and having the family and all the rest of it.
Right.
How much is the Constitution focused on versus case law or procedure and that sort of a thing? How much is that foundation talked about for in the early stages of your development?
It is absolutely at the forefront of the entire training. So the Constitution, specifically, when you're talking Fourth Amendment, is the biggest. The search and seizure, that is the biggest. Like for us, when we were in the academy, we could get stopped at any moment by the academy commander, an RTO, the class sergeant. They would stop you and they would say, for me, Cadet Thomas, what is the Fourth Amendment? And you would have to recite the Fourth Amendment. And you would have to give them the preamble to the Constitution and the Fifth Amendment. So you had to know those in and out.
Sounds like some of our elected representatives should go through this.
Oh, dude,
perhaps,
I think
perhaps
all
crack
of our
that
elected,
thing. Yes.
Yeah, because they have a significant misunderstanding of their roles and their abilities, and I don't think they.
I'm not confident that over half of them have ever read that document. I would say, I would say more than once, more than twice over a 50-year career, 40-year career, I would guess. It certainly doesn't seem like it from the outside looking in. I found it interesting. I talked to a Vietnam veteran years ago who talked about how they studied the Constitution in boot camp. It was Army boot camp. And when I went through Navy boot camp in 96, it was non-existent. Did not talk about the Constitution at all. I thought that was and I might have forgotten. Yeah. I might have forgotten, but I think it would have stood out to me just by my background, my interests, and my curiosity and all that. I think that would have stood out to me if we had studied it in boot camp or in OCS. It was not an OCS either.
Wow.
But in the 60s, the person I was talking to, Army boot camp, they did spend time talking about the Constitution because you're raising your right hand to support and defend this thing. So it makes sense that perhaps you spend a little time on it over the however many weeks boot camp is. But maybe it's in there now. I don't know, but I'd like it. I'd like it if it was, but I would be shocked. Maybe someone can mention in the comments that they just went through boot camp and they spent a full day, 2 days, 3 days on the Constitution, and then they came back.
That would be beautiful if they did.
Yeah,
and maybe I can tell you.
I was going to maybe during a time when you're not sleep deprived and you're not when you're going to remember this thing.
Right. For us though, specifically at the sheriff's office, at our sheriff's office, it's obviously at the forefront as well. We have, it's weird because they have this new saying now in America, and it's constitutional sheriffs. And they actually use that as a derogatory term sometimes. Like they refer to my sheriff as a constitutional sheriff, meaning in their opinion, he's so constitutionally focused that he's considered a right-wing extremist. And so it gets really odd because for us, as we went through the academy, that was the document, that was a foundational document for us to do our policing from, right? And we had to learn that. And then case law is second to that because obviously the Constitution being the foundation, case law comes second because what happens when we get case law decisions is the Supreme Court typically, or one of the circuit courts, has said, okay, this particular case, this is how things happened, and this is how it applies moving forward for policing. So when it comes to like search and seizure, there'll be specific case law that says, okay, as it relates to search and seizure, you can only do these specific things as a police officer. These are the expectations, blah, blah, blah. So those are the two things that really drive us. And again, when you look at us, the Constitution is so important to us. We have some cadets that are going to be graduating, which is a really cool thing, man. If you ever get a chance to go to a police graduation, by all means do it, because it's much like, when you graduate boot camp or when you get your trident, it's the same type of feeling. You go there and you see these young, bright individuals that have just been beat down and now they're getting their badge and their authority. And it's a real cool thing to watch. So we have that happening in a couple of weeks. And I just ran into one of our cadets this morning and came over, gave me a big hug. He says, "I'm almost there, Chief. I got 2 weeks." And I'm like, yeah. But when they graduate, I give them a letter. It's a chief's letter, and the sheriff has allowed me to do this, where I give them a little rah-rah, and I kind of tell them, here's the world that you're about to enter, right? It's violent. It's ugly. we're the ones between chaos and normalcy. You've chosen to walk that line, and you've got to do it carefully, right? You have to represent your agency and your family well. And along with this message, I give them a pocket constitution, and I tell them that this is our guiding document. If you ever are in a place where you're questioning what is right, what is wrong, let this document guide you and carry it in your pocket so that you have it with you and you have a true understanding of who you are and why you're here.
Wow. That's awesome that you do that. That's really cool. What was your first, do you remember your first call that stands out in your mind, whether it's with your field training officer or with them standing back, letting you handle it? Or what's one of your first calls that really stands out as, I don't know what the best term is, a wake up call or a, like, oh, this is real, or something that just stands out. Maybe something you helped that just confirmed you're on the right track, or what stands out to you when you think back to 30 years ago?
So the one that stands out in my mind, and it's for no particular reason other than you'll find it funny here when I tell it. And at the time, it was just one of those things where I was like, this is real. And so I make my first traffic stop, right? And so you got to understand, for 12 or 15 weeks, however long your particular academy is, they've pounded into you like, people are trying to kill you. You've got to be on your toes. People are trying to kill you. People are trying to kill you. And so you are so amped up when you leave the academy. You're like, oh my God, everybody's trying to kill me, right? And so every stop I am on, every call I go to, I've got to watch hands. I've got to do this. So you're almost you are hyper vigilant, but you're almost at the extreme level of that. So I make my first traffic stop, and I can feel myself as I'm walking up. I can feel I'm so amped up that I'm shaking. And I'm just, I've got a huge adrenaline dump going, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm getting up there and I walk up and I'm like, hi. And I'm like, hi. And I said, I'm kind of like forgetting what I'm supposed to do here.
Yeah.
Like, I need your license. Okay. Why'd you stop me? I don't know. And they're like, what? And, they're just, it's whatever for them. They're just kind of like, what do you mean you don't know? And I'm like, I don't remember. I said, but they gave me a badge, they gave me a gun and a car, and so I'm supposed to be out here stopping people. And so here we are. And the guy kind of chuckled and was like, all right. And he gives me his license, and I walk back to the car, and my FTO did not hear that conversation. He waited back at the car. I get back and he's like, how'd it go? I'm like, I'm an idiot, dude. Man. I didn't remember any of this. And he's like, it's cool, man. Just calm down. Here's why we stopped him. We talked about it. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. So then, I went back up and ended up giving the guy a warning, but just told him, sorry, man, I'm kind of new at this.
That's awesome.
Like, oh, it's all good.
That's awesome. That's cool that you made it a warning. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I got pulled over recently. But same stretch of road too, on the way, taking the kids to camp. No. Yeah. First I was in my truck the first time, and it went, it was one of those things where it went from like 75 to 65 back to 70. It's like along that stretch in Wyoming. Maybe it was like 80 to 70. Anyway, apparently I was going very fast. And I like to just go slow like these days. I like the truck. Right, I don't have like fast cars. I like Land Cruisers, this happened to be my truck, which is newer, which is why it just felt like I was going in like whatever at normal speed and happened to be going a lot faster. But yeah, I got a ticket. No. Yeah, that's all right. I thought my little guy was there. It was last year. I'm like, my little guy was in the seat next to me. I thought for sure, like, you'd be like, oh, you're taking your kid to camp. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, this is, just went from 80 to 65 or whatever it was. But yeah, so I got one of those.
Was it a motorcycle officer? Because they're soulless, dude. They get everybody.
No, it was, it was just over the border in Wyoming. So it was whatever they call their version of highway patrol troopers. Maybe.
Yeah, state troopers.
I think that's what it was. What he was. But he had no sense of humor. There was no sense of humor on that one. No. So same stretch of road this last year. Now I'm in my wife's car. And first I was working on the way. So I'm working till we get for the first hour of the drive. Our little guy's in the back. We're taking him to camp, and anyway, I'm working away. I close it and I'm like, give my wife a break. I'm like, okay, I just finished that. Just did what I needed to do. Okay, I pull over. I hadn't even driven her car yet. And so it's much more modern, let's say, than what I'm used to with my 1997 Land Cruiser, which I like, or my 88 FJ62, which I'm not very difficult to break the speed limit in those.
Yeah.
So pull over, I get out, jump in the thing. I'm like, how do you even turn this like thing on? Is it like there's buttons and it's like, anyway, so I get in, I drive it for less than 5 minutes. Same stretch of road.
No.
Yeah, I pulled over again.
Not the same guy, is it?
I thought it might be, but it was not. And so I pull over and the guy gets out and I roll down the window. I'm like, sir, I am so sorry. I've been in this car for less than 5 minutes. I don't even know how to turn this thing off right now. I'm so sorry. And he was like laughing. I'm like, this is my wife's car. I have no idea what I'm doing here. My wife's laughing. My kid's rolling her eyes. And so I don't even know if he gave me a warning. He was just like, get out of here. And I'm like, I don't even
felt your pain.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even like this thing. I'm getting back. So I switched off. My wife got back and continued to work. So then because I mean, it's a nice car, but it's not my, I like the old school stuff, I like just a cruise, but that's
well, and on the speeding stuff, man, that's people always ask like, what do you write tickets? Do you not? And it's kind of like, well, I kind of gauge it by the interaction. Cause really the ticket thing should be a learning thing, right? You're trying to get people to have better behavior, better driving. And typically speaking, when I run into people where they're just hauling butt and I stop them, it's just a discussion. And if they take responsibility 9 times out of 10, I'm like, cool, man, just don't do that again. Right. Just, slow down. You know, you were speeding. I know you were speeding, but it's the ones that immediately start with the excuses or the lies. I'm like, come on, man. Serious. So yeah, I'm surprised you got a ticket on the other one. Cause typically speaking, they're, state troopers are different.
Yeah, and I even had because I was dropping off a whole box of books to the fire department and the police department in Jackson, and so I had a whole box of books with me, like I'm taking them there, and so I had another like a few books that were loose that weren't in the thing, so I thought he might see that and be like, oh, cool, whatever, didn't happen.
Didn't happen. That's surprising, dude. Because I mean, you are Jack Carr, bro. Hey. Come on.
Hey, the Lady Justice. No special treatment. That's right. I was definitely blind with that first guy. The other guy was just laughing because he knew, like, yeah, this is obviously not your car. Because I'm very uncomfortable driving this thing.
Well, dude, those new cars are so weird too. Because this was a couple years back, but the first accident I went to with a Tesla involved.
Oh, it's not a Tesla, by the way. No, it's not a Tesla.
Yeah. But the lady's stuck in the driver's seat because of how the wreck happened. She's kind of pinned. The door, is jammed or whatever. So I'm trying to get another door open. And so I go over to it and I'm kind of rubbing the door. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so I look inside and she's like, what's wrong? I said, I have no idea how to open this door.
Yeah.
Like I've never messed with a Tesla. And she's like, oh, you have to do this and this. And so she kind of walks me through it, but I told her I feel like such an idiot. Like I feel like I should know this, but the newer cars were just kicking my butt. To your point, that technology, I wasn't used to it, and it's crazy how far the cars have advanced.
Yeah, I love. I think I want to check, but the latest TRD Pro of whether it's Tacoma or for sure the 4Runner still has a key. You can still put a key in. You can still turn it. So it's a new car, but it still has a key. And I think other models are push button, like some of the other, even same year ones are push button. But the TRD Pro has the key. So I really want to get another TRD Pro before they change it, because I'm worried when the new 4Runner comes out that it's going to be all push button and much more huge screen. Whether the last ones were just like small screen, kind of normal, whatever. But you can still push buttons. You can still twist knobs for radio and all the rest of it. Anyway,
I've got a 2011 Tacoma TRD Pro.
Nice,
and I love it, man. And my mom, she got in it to drive it. And she's like, where's your camera? I said, oh, it's up in the rear view mirror. It's a little like 2-inch by 2-inch thing that pops up on the mirror. She's like, oh my God, that's so small, because she's used to the big screens now. And I'm like, Mom, come on, this is a Tacoma. Don't be banging on my Tacoma now.
Yeah. No, that's why I'm worried they're going to change it. And it's because they announced a new Tacoma recently. I haven't seen one in person yet, but so I don't know if the TRD Pro version has the key or not. I'm not sure. But anyway, point being, I like the old school stuff, especially these days. In the academy, and when you first got out, what are you guys carrying at the time as far as pistols and rifles and shotguns?
So When I first got out, I was carrying a wheel gun, dude. Believe it or not, it
Nice.
was a 38 special. We were still 38 special Smith and
38.
Wesson. That was at the time frame that a lot of agencies were switching over from wheel guns to semi-autos.
Uh-huh.
Glock was kind of the thing, right? It
Yeah.
had become a thing. People were starting to switch to Glock, but we had some old school Army guys that were Beretta guys. So my
Hmm.
first semi-auto, I was in the wheel gun for a very short time because I joined like right during the transition from wheel
Mm.
guns to semis. And Beretta 92 FS was my first semi-auto, and I just loved that gun.
Mm.
I shot well with it. It was like my baby. And
Lethal
we
weapon. You have
stayed in
lethal
Berettas.
weapon connection there,
Yeah,
to Die Hard connection. So that's awesome. What did they
yeah.
do with the wheel guns when they transition? What do they do with those at police departments when they transition to a whole new firearm?
So typically they give you the option of buying
Oh,
yours.
wow.
So because it's your gun and there's some sentimental value to that.
Yeah.
And so they'll give you the option to buy it. And if you don't buy it, then they just typically trade them into,
Oh,
where whoever we're using to get the new guns, they'll trade them off to them
oh,
and
interesting.
get some
Did you keep
credit.
yours?
Say again.
Did you keep yours?
I did not. I did
Oh,
not kick myself. I was a young,
I
struggling deputy, man.
yeah, yeah, and that's when like $300 that's a big deal,
Yeah.
back then or something, whatever they were selling them for. That's wild. So what about rifles and shotguns?
So rifles had not been a thing yet for quite a while.
Mm,
Shotguns were the thing. They were still. So we had Winchesters Winchesters and Remington seemed to be the two that police were carrying back then. The
Late
shorties,
70s.
and carried those just right in between your seats, and they'd be mounted there. And I don't know that I really don't remember pulling my shotgun much.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple times I can remember back pulling it. I mostly went handgun. And then as we got into the late 90s and early 2000s, we started seeing rifles. But typically those were only for SWAT guys, like
Uh,
in our agency anyway. SWAT guys would carry the rifles. Normal patrol guys were still carrying shotguns. And it wasn't until we got into the late 2000s that rifles on patrol started becoming a thing. And now our whole agency, if you're on patrol, even our motors carry rifles on the back of their bikes. And rifles are probably more prevalent than handguns on scene. You'll see like a guy with a handgun, everybody else will have their rifle slung.
Wow, man, that's awesome. And because when you think about a sheriff, I think about a sheriff showing up with that Remington 870, like wood furniture, ready to
Right.
rock with that thing. Like that's yeah. As growing up, that's what you saw because once again you didn't really see rifles in cars when I was a
Right.
kid, but you saw the shotgun in there, and it was right between those seats. And as a kid, I was like, whoa,
Oh,
that's
dude. And you
amazing.
know as well as I do that that's a special sound. When you hear that sound, that grabs attention quickly.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I had a police officer up here over a few months back, and just showing him around. And but he let the kids come out and check out the vehicle, and it was
Nice.
like not a Bronco, like Blaze. No, anyway, it was like a Tahoe, yeah, like that kind
Okay.
of a yeah. So, but there was the rifle in there, there was a shotgun in there, there was the not less than lethal options in there, there was all that stuff, and it was laid out. I mean, it was legit. I was like, man, this setup is awesome. You got the tools, but you're out there like this guy alone, and
Mhm.
that's what you have. And we're kind of a little more remote for this area anyway, but
Yeah.
but he can get a lot more remote outside of, city limits going out there. And it's just backup's a little ways off.
Yeah. Yeah. And for us, just the state of the world, it's more violent, whether you want to admit it or not. The world is becoming more violent. So we're facing more and more threats, more and more violence. And it's been proven. I mean, the last school shooting was solved by an LPVO, right? And so having that distance, having that ability to get out and touch somebody at a little bit further distance than you're normally used to as a patrol officer is definitely advantageous. And so I think the industry recognizes that, and it's becoming more normal to
Mhm.
see rifles because it's become easier to solve problems with those.
Yeah. Did you cycle through different divisions of your department, like K9 and SWAT and search and rescue, or is that a collateral duty, or what did your path look like? What is it, a division that you call those things, or what are they?
So typically they're just different units,
Yeah.
sometimes divisions, depending on how big they are. But for me, my path was, as I stated in the beginning, I started in our jail. Then from the jail, I went out to what we refer to as going out to the road. I became a deputy sheriff, just a patrol guy, worked patrol for a little bit, and I went into a specialty unit, which was traffic. And traffic units are typically like where your motors are, stuff like that. We didn't have motors back then, so we were in cars. And so I did traffic, which was taking all the fatals, doing DUIs, doing accidents. And the unique thing back then for us is that we also did interdiction, drug interdiction. And so did some drug interdiction. And from that unit, I got recruited into undercover narcotics. And so I went from there into undercover work. I did undercover work for a while. I promoted out of there, became a sergeant. And when you promote, typically you go back to patrol to get your patrol time in. And so I went back to patrol. And then as a sergeant, I was a sergeant for about 10 years. And during that 10 years, I was a patrol sergeant. I was an academy sergeant. I was our training sergeant. And then I went back in as a narcotics sergeant doing undercover work again. That whole time, 97 is about when I joined our SWAT team, and that's a collateral duty. And so I was on a collateral duty team for the next 18 years as I went through all my different assignments. From sergeant, I got promoted to lieutenant, and when I moved to lieutenant, I took over narcotics, our anti-smuggling squad, and our SWAT team. So I had all three of those, and I kind of ran those all the way through until 2016. I did a little bit of patrol time in there for a short bit, uh, but mainly those units from 2010 to 2016, and then 2016 is when Mark won his bid for sheriff, and he offered me this position. So it was, as you know, I know you and I knew each other when you jumped into some different roles, and it was a little bit of a tough jump, man, because I was going from high speed, low drag units, good tight knit units, into a purely administrative role, and it took a little bit of doing because you really you really have to adjust your lifestyle because I was not used to being home during normal hours. I was not used to sitting behind a desk almost the entire day, attending meetings, some of which are some of the most ridiculous meetings I've ever been in my life. And so,
Any
big adjustment.
bureaucracy, I think, is going to
But
have those.
yeah, but that was kind of it, man. I was a ground pounder for probably 24 years of my career, and then I moved into this administrative spot, and I've been here since. But one of the big motivating factors, I think, for me moving into this spot was I always saw an opportunity to have more decision making authority, because I knew what was screwed up. I could see what was screwed up, and I could see solutions. But sometimes you don't have the authority to make the changes. And when the sheriff moved me into this position, I gained a whole bunch of authority to make a whole bunch of changes. And like our overnight, our SWAT team, we went from the old crappy night vision that we had, like Gen 3 stuff, into PVS 31s and White Foss. And so it just game changing stuff that I was able to do, where before I would try to get that done as a lieutenant, and I was always shut down. Oh, it's not in the budget, or not right now, or whatever the answer may be. And so when I took this position, it was very satisfying in that sense that I was able to kick down a lot of doors that had been shut on me and take care of our troops better than they've ever been taken care of before.
Nice. What was the training like when you went into undercover work? Is there something that they put you through to test you to see if you have the aptitude, or are they just like, hey, grow your hair long, get out there and, do the thing? What was that like?
So when I first went in, it was a lot different than it is these days. I want to give that disclaimer. So my training was really, so here's how it went down, the recruitment process. Basically, two guys came in, the sergeant, and we had corporals back then. They were in the narcotics unit. They came in, they kind of cornered me in an office, and they're like, hey, we want to get you on the team. And I'm like, okay, but like, look at me. I'm high and tight.
Right.
I look like a cop, right?
Yeah.
I scream cop. And the one guy told me, he's like, dude, I don't care how you look. He said, it's your heart and how you deal with the streets. Like, okay. And so they said, we want you on the team. And I said, Okay. And so you get on the team, you get your assignment. It's really cool because you're dressing normal, right? You can wear whatever you want, and you kind of do your thing. But my training was really like, okay, we're going to drop you off in one of the roughest neighborhoods in our county, and you figure it out. And if you figure it out, then you've made it. If you don't, then yeah, you probably go back to patrol.
Take on this holiday season with the help of Navy Federal Credit Union. When you use the Navy Federal Cash Rewards card, you can earn up to 1.75 cash back on all purchases. You can redeem your rewards as soon as you earn them. And using the Navy Federal mobile app makes redeeming easier than ever. Enjoy the rewards of cash back without any annual fee, balance transfer, or foreign transaction fees. There are no limitations on rewards, and they never expire while your account is open. Learn how you can get cheer to last all year with the Cash Rewards card at NavyFederal.org. Our members are the mission. Insured by NCUA, rates are variable and range between 14.90% and 18% APR based on credit worthiness. ATM fees for cash advances are up to $1 at non-Navy Federal ATMs. Message and data rates may apply. Visit NavyFederal.org for more information. Let me tell you about First Form. They have amazing products. My personal favorites are the protein sticks and the Micro Factor daily nutrient packs. And why do I like them so much? Because First Form makes it super easy to get quality protein and nutrients on the go. And I always seem to be on the go. While their products are top-notch quality, what I like the most about them are their values. First Form is so much more than a supplement company. They are deeply committed to both American jobs and your personal well-being. At First Form, they value people. In fact, the only thing they've automated is a tape machine, a symbol of their dedication to providing jobs and making lives better. They care about employing people, nurturing their growth, and genuinely improving lives. Their mission is simple. First Form is there to help you reach your fitness and wellness goals. They believe in a partnership where if you meet them halfway, they'll help you make progress. Go to firstform.com/Jack Carr to receive free shipping on any orders over $75. That's the number one, stphorm.com/Jack Carr. Once again, that's the number one, stphorm.com/Jack Carr and receive free shipping on any orders over $75.
And so you kind of, you just, you get dropped off, you go do your thing, you try and buy some dope from some gangsters and, or at least get some conversations going and show that you can work in that environment. And of course I had grown up in that environment, so I wasn't uncomfortable doing that. So, yeah.
Because the way you describe it, it sounds like, remember Team America when he goes into the bar in his disguise and he's like, anybody heard of any terrorist events planned or, like that? That's kind of what I picture in my mind. But geez, that sounds, so what are you thinking when you walk in there for the first time and do that? Like, are you like back up around the corner in a van? Are they listening? Like all that sort of a thing. Are you targeting certain people? Are you like working up a hierarchy to get to somewhere else? Is there thought and planning behind this or what's?
No, a lot of it is, you find out after the fact that a lot of it is fluffed up to get in your head. Right. And you're going in this really bad neighborhood, these dudes, they're shooters, blah, blah, blah. And they want to get you all amped up and get you scared essentially to see how you're going to function. And then they'll watch from a distance. And this has even happened where it has been staged. So the people you go to try and buy dope from are actually cops and you don't know they're cops. And it's all staged for you to just kind of go through a scenario to see how you act and
that sounds safer.
How you deal with it. Yeah.
That's wild. What was your diciest encounter or situation you're put in while you're undercover?
I think the most stressful one was we were working down in Nogales. We would trade work with other undercover squads, and so we were in Nogales, Arizona, and we were doing what was called a reversal, where we were selling the drugs to bad guys, and they were paying for them. And then at the end of that, we would be like, "Surprise! We're cops, and we're taking your money, and we're keeping the drugs." Uh, so we were doing one of those operations, and it kind of went sideways, where there was a foot chase through a mall area that turned into two car chases. We were in one of them. We're going through the streets of Nogales, and these guys are running for the port of entry, so they're trying to get back to Mexico. Um, we go through some hotel parking lots at high speed, and almost getting some wrecks and stuff. And so it's a high speed chase. It's a high speed chase, but it's between normal cars, because we're in undercover cars. So these aren't cop cars. These are normal cars chasing other normal cars. We end up in a parking lot of a kind of a strip mall, and they made a fatal error in pulling into the strip mall, because there was one entrance, one exit. And so we got them cornered. And when we get them cornered, they jump out. And of course, it's typically just a bailout. They take off running. And so they jump out, and one of them turns and he wants to fight. So now we're in a fist fight in the middle of the street, and it's just me and him, because my partner was dealing with the other guy. And so me and him are in a fist fight in somewhere in Nogales. I didn't even know what area we were in, but I knew, we were in Nogales still. We hadn't crossed the line. And so we're fighting it out. And then behind me, I hear screeching tires, and I hear metal hitting metal. And so there's a wreck that takes place, because other undercovers that are trying to catch up to this, they had wrecked behind us. We didn't know that. I knew something happened, but I didn't know exactly what. And so there's just all this chaos going on. So me and this guy go at it for a few, and I get the better of him and ultimately get him in cuffs. And there's the wreck, and there's just all this chaos. And you get done with something like that, and you look around and you're like, what just happened? And then of course you have hours and hours and hours of paperwork that are going to follow something like that. But the chase itself is stuff like that is pretty intense at the time. Then you kind of look back and you chuckle. And then the good thing is you tend to get street cred out of that. So, me and this particular guy, I guess he was a local guy that had a lot of clout and name for himself. And so the fact that a white guy, because he was a Hispanic dude and very machismo, the fact that a white guy had whooped him in the street and cuffed him up didn't sit well with his street rep, but kind of boosted mine.
Interesting. How about on SWAT? Is there a situation that stands out as one of the most difficult problems you had to solve as on the SWAT team?
Yeah, there's a couple. So some of the problems we had to solve on SWAT really revolved around just using antiquated equipment, right? And having not the right stuff to do the job. And so some of the stuff I describe in my book, some of the desert work that we did when we were doing counter cartel operations and trying to use older technology that we had been handed down through like the DRMO program, getting used stuff from the military. And trying to fight cartels who don't have an actual budget that they're working with or any constraints. Those were some difficult ones, because you're talking about very sophisticated groups, and we're going up against them and fighting them on what they consider their territory, which is open desert out in the middle of nowhere. So those were difficult. I think one of the most typical SWAT calls that was difficult for me was a barricade that we had with an older gentleman that he had found out his wife was cheating on him. He lost his stuff and kind of started shooting up his house. And we show up, and he ends up barricading inside the house, initially with hostages, and they get out. And so he's barricaded by himself. And he was 70 something years old. And this is where I learned to never discount age and never discount a Vietnam vet, because he was both. He was an older gentleman. He was a Vietnam vet. And so we come up with a gas plan, right? And so for those listening, not knowing what I'm talking about, essentially when you go on a SWAT call, you kind of do an evaluation of what you have, how you're gonna solve this problem. And so for us at that time, the plan was we'll use gas to push him out of his environment into our environment so we can safely get him into custody. And so we started that, and I was one of the initial grenadiers, and so I'm on a rooftop, kind of across. He's on what is the closest I can describe as a Greyhound bus. He's on a Greyhound bus. We don't know the layout of the interior, but we know it's kind of set up like an RV, so it's kind of like a mobile home. We can see his shadow through the windows moving because he's got it lit up, so we can see him moving throughout the bus through the windows. And I launched gas, and as soon as I launched gas, I was shooting a 37 single shot, so a 37 millimeter. I shoot my first round, I break it open to put in another round, and I hear some pops. I just hear pop, 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 and so I kind of look at my partner and I said, "Do we have guys shooting?" I thought they were shooting shotgun gas rounds, and so I'm like, "Are they shooting gas rounds down there?" And he says, "No, he's shooting at us." And I said, "No, that can't be true, right?" And so I put my second gas round in. I get my window that I'm going to punch it through, and I punch it through. And as soon as I launch, of course, with that 37, if people have never shot it, there's a huge flash signature on that thing. And so I shoot my gas round, huge flash signature that kind of front lights us, so we're kind of lit up as shadows behind that flash. And he immediately unloads on us, and so he starts putting rounds our way. We have an AC unit that we kind of jump behind for cover, and he just starts going wild with rounds. So he's shooting our way. Our armored vehicle had pulled up at that point, and he starts shooting at them. And so I can hear the rounds going, and you can hear like the gong of metal every time he's hitting it. So you're hearing, and it sounded like AK fire to me. He was shooting an SKS, so he's shooting an SKS. He's hitting the armored vehicle. He's shooting some our way. And we reload the gas again, and I punch another round in. This time I'm trying to put a round at him because, he's trying to kill us. So I'm trying to stop him from doing that. And as I put that third round into the bus, I ask our sniper over the radio, I'm like, "Can you see where he's shooting from?" And he said, "Well, all I can see is gun flashes from his gun." And I said, "Well, shoot at that, dude, because he's shooting at us." And so the sniper takes his first initial couple of shots, and the shooting stops. And I'm like, "Cool, so we're good." And we start kind of recovering and getting our gear together and kind of letting everything settle down. We have teams in place on the ground that are ready in case he exits that bus. And a little bit of time goes by, and he goes to war again. He starts shooting, and he's back at it. And so this time we're behind cover. We have kind of recovered. And I tell my partner, like, "Dude, we're pinned. Like, we can't go anywhere. We got to do something." And so at that time we were carrying HK G53s, which is a 223 round. And so I get my HK lined up and ready, and I tell him, "Okay, next volley, if you'll look out the side and tell me where he's shooting from, give me a target, and I'm going to go at him." And he's like, "All right." So my partner tells me, like, third window. Cool. I pop up and I just give it to him. And so I'm shooting at where I can see the gunfire coming from, and I unload on him. And again, the shooting starts or stops, and so we're like, "Okay, we're good." And we're laying behind cover. We're waiting. Nothing's going on. We kind of hold, and everything settles down again. And so it goes quiet now for about 30 minutes. And we're trying to figure out what's going on. And then we start getting relief plans in place because we've had guys that have been on station now for 8 hours or so through this whole thing. And so we're starting to get some relief. And ultimately, the gunfire doesn't happen anymore the rest of the night. And we're getting into the early morning. And now we're getting helicopters above. So we have media helicopters that are starting to show up. And the bad thing about that is if you don't restrict the airspace and if you don't ask them to restrict their feed, they will give away your position because they're filming the thing and they're showing it on live TV. So we had asked for all of that. Luckily, they canceled their live feed and stopped showing, everybody where we were. So we were able to ultimately, we heard one last shot right before daylight inside the bus. And so we thought, here we go again. He's back at it. And then nothing for the longest time. And so ultimately we ended up breaching the door to that bus. No response. And then when we breached the door initially, it kind of stuck because it's hydraulically activated and we hadn't hit the hydraulics correctly. And so we used our armored vehicle, hit the hydraulics correctly, and it released that door. And when it released that door, he was actually laying on the steps into the bus, and he had something covering his face. So we kind of thought he was, playing possum and trying to bait us in. So they sent a dog. A dog grabbed him and pulled him the rest of the way out. And ultimately, what we had found out, that last shot was him taking his own life. And all the shooting the night before, the back and forth, we had all missed him by inches, and he had missed us by inches. So it was just a big shootout. Nobody hit, and ultimately took his own life. But that was a real long and interesting night for me. And that was my first real deadly force encounter on the SWAT team, where we had a back and forth shooting. And yeah, it was interesting, and it was a big learning experience for us. We learned a lot of equipment failures and a lot of what we could have done better. And that was one of those things where I don't think we had been tested to that point. And that was our first real test, and we learned a lot.
Man, did you guys do no knock warrant type things as well, or did you was it mostly call outs for a barricaded suspect, like that sort of a thing, or did you actually like set up, hey, we have this person and need to go after him tonight, and here it is, and here's the warrant for him, and okay, we're going in, no knock or knock, whatever it might be. So did you do all those kinds of different scenarios? Was that part of your charter?
Yeah. So our team, we would do all that stuff. We would do the warrant services. We would do the barricades. We would do, if there was crowd control stuff, we were responsible for all that. And we would do our jail stuff too. We responded to a couple of jail incidents. We were involved in one of the biggest jail riots at our jail that we took care of. Wow. And so, like, for the warrant stuff, it has progressed over time. We used to do a lot of no knocks, a lot of nighttime search warrants. And as time progressed, like now, we'll still do a no-knock warrant, but it does not look the same, because it used to be dynamic entries. It was dynamic, flood the house, get as many guys in there as you can, and get them in every room. And over time, they've learned, and a lot of it due to you guys, the war fighters that were overseas. You guys perfected CQB so much during the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, that we were able to pull from that quite a bit and change our tactics, because the old tactic of kicking down a door and throwing 20 dudes into a house all at once and taking the rooms you could was very dangerous, as you know. And we've switched that tactic, and we can actually dominate a house quicker now, safer than we did back then, and not even step foot in the house, right? We're using exterior windows, we're using drones, we're using robots, and using our technology. And so we're keeping our guys safer, and we're actually controlling the environment quicker. So that's kind of how it has progressed over time. But we were a full service team, still are today.
Man, that's wild. Did you were involved in or ever think about one of these warrants, or was a situation ever come up when you're like, you know what? I don't know if we really need to hit this guy at 3 a.m. with the ram and come in and flood this house and escalate everything. And maybe we just have the sheriff knock on the door, just walk down the street, but hey, you know what? It's, time for you to come in, or, like that sort of a thing. Like, it's middle of the night, waking out of, sometimes I think about that, the wrong house type thing. It's just happened recently. Yeah. It's in the news recently. Things escalate quickly when someone kicks in the door and you're not sure what's going on. Rival gang, police, who knows? Cartel, whatever. Or knock, 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 middle of the day, 10 a.m., 9 a.m. Hey, we need to come talk to you. Come down. Let's talk this out. Handcuffs on. It's kind of like de-escalate. Like, do you ever think those things through? Is that part of your calculus?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my younger SWAT days, no, it was balls to the wall.
Yeah.
Speed was our friend. And so, but it did, there were situations, I can tell you as a SWAT guy, as a young SWAT guy, where we would finish hitting a house and you're like, did we really need to be here? Like, this seems like a pretty simple problem. And this was really not, there wasn't a high potential for violence once you look backwards at it. And that's where we started getting into threat matrices, and those started becoming a thing. And back then, LAPD was kind of the model to follow, because LAPD was the big team on this side of the U.S. So everybody would typically look at LAPD and what are they doing? How are they doing it? And you would adjust your tactics accordingly because their op tempo was just through the roof, and the amount of guys that they have out doing that work. And so over time, it changed to where you would get a threat matrix, and what a threat matrix would do for you is the detectives working the case would have to actually assign uh, threat points to known things. So if there was known threats, if there was, they were known to have weapons, they were known to have a violent history, all of those things would give points. And if you reached a certain point threshold, then it would activate the team. Okay, this is dangerous enough where it's beyond a normal patrol function or a normal detective function, and we need the SWAT guys to handle it. If it didn't meet those numbers, then typically speaking, like your point, you would just say, okay, detectives, you can go handle this with a door knock and, hey, we need to talk to you. You need to come in. And now that's progressed. A lot of the same methodology, but really in the SWAT world, if you can catch them out of their environment, that is ideal. So we do a lot of takeoffs where we'll take them off in a vehicle away from a residence, because in a house, it's the most dangerous, right? That's their domain. They know where everything's at, and that's where they're most likely to want to defend and protect.
Kids, wives, girlfriends, grandparents, other people, unknowns. Like there's, I'm sure before you go in, but it's just, it does seem like thinking things through a little more the way you have. It seems like a natural progression. Just looking at the last 20, 30, 40 years of the history of SWAT teams, and whether it's call outs or hitting that door, or sheriffs going up and knocking on the door instead of having a federal joint task force coming in with helicopters and armored vehicles and everything else at your house. Seems like some of those things, knock, 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 or hey, getting out of the car, hey man, time to talk.
Yeah. Well, and in today's world, it's even easier sometimes because so many people have either a lawyer on retainer or, a lawyer that they're in contact with. It's even easier to just call the lawyer and say, hey, I need your client here at this time and this day. If not, then we're going to have to go after them, right? And 9 times out of 10, they'll choose that option. Okay, I'll just turn myself in and make it easy.
Interesting. So when did you start thinking about a book?
Oh, man. Well, I think the thought first entered my mind, but back when I don't even remember when you and I first met, but I was trying to all the NRA stuff.
Yeah. Was it there? Was it shot somewhere in that time frame though, that decade ago or so?
Yeah. So back during that time frame when I met you and some of your buddies on the team, and Katie was really, one of my inspirations. So when she wrote her books, I paid attention to that. And when you got into writing, that was another thing I paid attention to. And so you always have, I think, this lingering thought in the back of your mind of like, man, I should really write some of this stuff down and for historical purposes and to pass it on and to let people know what we're doing in the world. And so I think it was probably a decade ago where the thought first entered my mind. But again, self-doubt sets in, a lot of things happen, right? And you just procrastinate. And then about 3 years ago, the sheriff was just kind of like, dude, you need to do this. Like, because he knew some of these stories. And he said, dude, you need to do this. Like, again, you there's stuff you did that nobody knows about. And not just me, but the great people I worked with. So there's things that you guys did that are part of U.S. history and nobody even knows it. And it would be great for you to tell those stories. And that really resonated with me. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to do it. And he was telling me, he was like, dude, just write a page a night, because again, I have a full-time job. It's like, just a page a night, even if you can get a paragraph a night, just start somewhere. So I did. I started writing. And the funny thing is, as you start writing stuff you've been through, you start remembering more and more, right? Mm-hmm. Or you talk to other guys and they're like, oh yeah, and then this. And like, oh man, I forgot about that. So that kind of happened over a 3-year period. And come into 2022 and I was like, I'm ready. I had the manuscript ready. And then I started figuring out what's it going to take to get this into the physical form of a book. And I started so here's the funny thing. I finished the manuscript and I'm like, I'm done. This is it. I got a book. And then I figured out very quickly that is just the beginning. And all the hard stuff came after that.
Man, and so how did cartel was cartels always on your on were cartels always on your radar from your earliest days, or has that progressed over the years?
Yeah, so the funny thing is this, I've known about cartels my entire life because growing up where I grew up, it was a very heavy Hispanic population. I grew up with pretty much all Mexican Americans. So I grew up in that culture. And back then they weren't even cartels. They would be referred to as mafiosos. And so you grew up and you kind of knew these guys were there and what they were about. And then as I got a little bit older into the high school years and I moved out into more rural areas, started working in farms and stuff like that, there was still that presence, right? You knew who these guys were. There was kind of a mystique surrounding them. And then when I got into cop work, specifically in our county, because we're here in the Southwest and we're about 50 miles off the Mexican border in our county, and we're right in the thick of it when it comes to the cartels and the land they operate on. So I was very aware of them as I got into this career because they were operating in our county, and the southwest portion of our county is just infested with these guys. So I kind of knew about them my entire time, and then they became more and more prevalent because they moved into power. Right when there was the shift of power from the Colombians to the Mexican cartels, they became more and more prevalent. So we saw more and more of them in our law enforcement dealings, and they had more and more influence in our county.
Man, um, yeah. How about violence as far as it goes and human trafficking versus drugs? What does that look like versus, and also the adaptability of these organizations to move people, to move drugs, to move whatever they're moving into the country, and then where they go once they get across that border, how their tactics have changed over your time in law enforcement, and the problems that today. And also working with BORTAC. You talk about BORTAC in your book here. I did some work with them, a class with them, a tracking class with them, and it was very cool to go out on the border with those guys and see what just how the people coming across the border were countering our technology with some kind of lower technology solutions, and it's a constant game of adaptation, just like warfare, pretty much just like anything in life. So that was really cool to spend some time on the border with those guys. Have you tried the Jack Carr Hooten Young Warrior Proof Whiskey? If not, I highly recommend it. If you don't know Hooten Young, check them out at hootenyoung.com. It was started by Norm Hooten and Tim Young and born of a love of whiskey and cigars. If Norm Hooten sounds familiar, it may be because you recognize the name from the film Black Hawk Down, where Delta Force operator Hoot was portrayed by Eric Bana. You might have caught two references to Hooten Young in the Terminal List Amazon Prime video series. It's the whiskey James Reese and Boozer are drinking in episode 1. You can't fake aged whiskey. My Jack Carr Hooten Young collaboration is aged 16 years. It's 125 proof and bottled straight from the barrel. This Jack Carr Warrior Proof American whiskey turned out better than I could have possibly imagined. As Norm says, Hooten Young was created to help folks slow down, bond with the people around them, and remember those who are no longer here. Go to hootenyoung.com and get your hands on a bottle today. That's HOOTENYOUNG.com. So what was it like working with those guys, and then what has it been like to see this this threat adapt, or this issue and this problem set adapt over time?
Ortac are some of the most awesome dudes I've ever worked with, some of the most squared away. And we worked with their national team mostly. There's local teams. There's a Tucson Vortac team, and they're squared away dudes too. But this particular team that I mentioned in the book, that was their national team. They had come out of Del Rio, Texas, and they were assigned here as a TDY to kind of help with the problem because we were just being overrun at that time. And the Sinaloa cartel kind of controls this area, and they were just, they were moving probably 60, 70 tons of dope through our county a month. And so we were just getting hammered. These Vortackers showed up, and we were in a meeting, and I had contacted their commander, and I said, hey, we're kind of having some issues of stepping on each other, and I'd like to solve that. And he was like, yeah, man, let's do it. And so we sat down and we kind of brainstormed what the issues were, and they're autonomous from within the Border Patrol, so they're kind of like you guys were set up in SOCOM. They had their own budget, They were able to kind of do their own thing. So it was really nice working with them because they had their own technology that they could use. They were able to kind of work outside the normal boxes. And as were we on our level. And so we teamed up with them and we basically went one for one. Me and the commander, because I was a commander of our team at that time. So we worked it out. And we said, okay, we'll put one of your operators with one of our operators. We'll team them up. And we were doing a lot of vehicle-borne operations, and they had not to that point. They had done a lot of dismount stuff, and so we teamed up. We showed them how we were doing our vehicle-borne operations, and they helped us conduct a lot of those. And then when we would get on the ground, they would show us how they would do their tracking on ground operations, which they were phenomenal at.
Yeah.
And those guys are just like, it blows my mind how good of trackers they are, because they would seriously, this is no joke. They would say 3 dudes came through here. The one guy has an injured left leg and they're going at about this pace. Like, what? Like, how? I can't even see the footprint. And you're telling me how many dudes there are and that one guy's got a hurt leg. That's how good they were at tracking. But just squared away dudes. And so we did a lot of operations with them that were very successful. And some of those, I put in the book because I wanted to give them props, because they are some of the unsung heroes too of America that people just discount. And there's board tackers all over the U.S. That are doing phenomenal work and doing it to keep our country safe. So I wanted to give them the shout out. And then to the other part of the question, the technology and how they've adapted is crazy. And they, when I first started like chasing cartels out in the areas that they operated, they were working off of like walkie-talkie radios. And so sometimes we could intercept those transmissions. They were very rudimentary in how they ran their operations. So we were able to kind of set up on them and kind of intercept them and interrupt their program. Then they switched to like VHF radios, and they had their own radio system. And so we'd be able to kind of use scanners and break in on that and hear the radio traffic. But then even when you hear the radio traffic, you have a language barrier first if you don't speak Spanish. And then second, they're using slang and their own codes. So they would have their own code system that they would talk on the radios to move and coordinate their operations. So you would have to filter through that. And then as time went on, just specifically to the radios, they went to encryption. So they encrypted their radios. And so then you have to have a key to get that encryption. And so what we would have to do is work on intercepting scouts, because they would have scouts littered throughout the hills from Phoenix proper all the way down to the Mexican border and over the Mexican border into Mexico. They would have scouts on hills talking to each other and essentially acting as their own repeater system all the way up. So they would talk hill to hill using their radios, and they would be on an encrypted network. So you would have to try and take off a scout and grab his radio before he turned it off. And because their instructions were turn off the radio, throw the battery, throw the radio the other way, because then if we found it, put it back together, it would be passcoded. And if you didn't know the passcode, the radio would lock. And so you would have to be able to defeat that. And then they figured out that we were able to intercept those radios, doing some scout interdictions. And so they went to rolling encryption, and the rolling encryption made it even harder to listen to. And they also started using programs much like we use to track our radios and to have real-time data on the radio. So they would have GPS location, and they would be able to remotely zap. So if they saw a radio move from its location too far, they would assume that it had been compromised, and they would zap that radio remotely, and it would become a brick. And then they would reestablish communications they would essentially just wipe all of those radios out. Okay, we're off that frequency now. We're going to a new frequency. Here's new radios. And they would be up and running on new radios, new rolling encryption. And they would pass those out and just discard the others. And at the same time, they had phones, right? So when they were in areas where they had phone service, they would use a lot of BlackBerry Messenger. They would use Boost Mobile, where they were doing the push button talking to each other and communicating that way. So you would have to counter that with signal intelligence and trying to triangulate and figure out and all that stuff. And the scouts were the big game. Because when you would try to move into an area to take down a dope load, and you're in a valley surrounded by hills, and the hills are all watching for movement and reporting that movement, it's very difficult. It becomes a huge cat and mouse game. And that's what we were in a lot of times. And keep in mind that we're local law enforcement, we're a sheriff's office, and we're trying to figure out military maneuvers on a foreign the army, essentially, because these are bad guys that are armed to the teeth and operating much like a military unit. And so we would have to try and counter that. And so a lot of it was learning on the fly and figuring it out.
Man, is it drugs, people? Is it children? And as far as like child trafficking for like sex slavery type thing. What were you seeing either the most of, or what was the most profitable to them? And then are you just sticking your fingers kind of like in a dam that's breaking? Is that what you're feeling? Or are you more organized, working with Border Patrol, working with federal agencies, and intercepting targeted groups that are coming across in a well coordinated type of effort? Or are you doing all of the above?
I would say all the above is taking place. Sometimes you are just plugging holes in a dam, but there are coordinated efforts. There's a lot of cooperative efforts between Fed and local, a lot of large scale cases down to street level cases. And how it has progressed over the years is back in the heyday, back in when I'm talking like 2009, 2010, primarily marijuana. That was the Sinaloa cash crop. They were moving a
Okay.
lot of marijuana into the states, followed by methamphetamine and cocaine. And then heroin started making a comeback because of the opioid crisis created by Big Pharma. So Big Pharma kind of created the opioid crisis, and the easy solution to that became heroin. So if you couldn't, because they made it harder and harder to get the scripts, right? So people that were addicted to oxy here in the US, they couldn't get oxy, or it was very expensive. The cheap alternative was heroin. And so the Mexican cartels saw that as a business opportunity, started pushing that more. So we started moving more away from marijuana as the US legalized weed, and started getting into more of the opium, cocaine, and meth. And then you move forward to probably 5 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and they started transitioning to purely synthetics because there's no grow season associated with that.
Mm.
So synthetics, they can make 24/7. They don't have to wait for the opium to grow and then process it, or the poppies to grow and process it. They would just be able to synthetically make the fentanyl, synthetically make the meth, and those
Yeah.
became the two big pushes. And then, of course, they have a direct connect with China to get the chemicals that they need to do all of that. So they started creating these super labs and pushing synthetics, and that became the big push. And then that completely switched when administrations switched. So when we saw the administration shift from President Trump into President Biden, there was a significant shift on the Mexican cartel side, with drugs becoming a secondary commodity to humans, and they started pushing humans through. And so we've seen more human trafficking than we've ever seen. And it's a renewable, or it's a reusable commodity to them, right? So they can reuse a human being over and over and over, whereas a drug gets used and then they have to replace it.
Mm.
So it's a good business model for the cartels to push humans through. And then if you also think about the factor that if I'm a Mexican cartel and I have a pound of drugs that I've created and I ship that across the US border and it gets caught, once it gets across the US border, then I'm out the drugs and I haven't received any profit from those
Mm.
drugs. If I have a human, I charge them, and this is what they're doing. They charge them prior to crossing over. So they're getting anywhere from 6 to 15,000 per person that they push over the border. They get that money ahead of time, push them over the border. That person gets caught on the other side. Cartel doesn't care; they already got paid, so they're making their money up front, and they control those borders. They control all of the smuggling routes, and so they're taxing all those people to get over. They're making their money, and then once the people get over, they're extorting them further. Right? They're taking them to stash houses, and then they're telling them, well, to get to from location A to location B, you owe us this much more. And so they become almost indentured servants to the cartels, where they're having to work for them to repay their debt that they're never going to repay. And then, as you talk about children, I was just talking to the sheriff about this yesterday, and a scary statistic that he had been talking to Border Patrol about was last fiscal year. So for the federal fiscal year, that's October to September, and for that year, um, last year there was 96,000 unaccompanied minors. So that means 96,000 kids who didn't belong to anybody in that group that got caught had been intercepted. And so if you think about that, 96,000 kids that don't belong to anybody, and bad guys are moving them from point A to point B. So that kind of tells you the state of the world and what's going on with them, and why, like movies like The Sound of Freedom should wake everybody up, because that's a real thing. When you're talking about almost 100,000 kids that had been moved across our southern border with no adult supervision, no relative with them, just on their own, that should tell you what's going on.
And once they get across, are they getting helped by American citizens, or is it people that are already here that aren't U.S. citizens that are acting as scouts or facilitators that have safe houses that then move them up to, let's say, San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, New York, wherever they might be going? How much of it is facilitated by U.S. citizens?
That's a hard one to answer, dude. Because there's definitely facilitation, but to what level is hard to say, because a lot of them are trying to get to places, right? They're trying to get to certain places in the U.S. where they have other relatives and stuff. And depending on what they owe, who they owe, or what they've signed up for, and who they've signed with, will determine a lot of what's going to happen to them after they get to the U.S. And where we see the most U.S. Citizen interaction is on the actual movement of people from the southern border further into the interior a little bit. So you'll get people that will get recruited, U.S. citizens, and a lot of them are kids now. They're recruiting kids on Snapchat, on some of the other social media platforms, and they are basically saying, "Hey, do you want to make a quick $1,000? Yeah, okay, drive down to this location and pick up these people and take them to this other spot, and you'll get paid when you deliver them." And so these kids are falling for that, and they're going down and they're basically smuggling humans further into the U.S. and making money to do it, but getting recruited on some of the social media platforms. And so they're facilitating this whole smuggling thing as well. So that's where we see the most U.S. Citizen interaction with the smuggling game itself. The rest of it is pretty controlled by the cartels itself. So it's their people controlling movement. They're just using other people to do it. And they're very compartmentalized. That's another thing I forgot to hit on. As we progressed over time, they learn very quickly how to further insulate themselves, and they become very compartmentalized. Where it used to be, when I first started, you could catch a person hauling dope, and that person knew who contacted them, where they're going, who they're going to contact when they get there. They would know all of those things. And now you'll pick a person up that they were given coordinates and a phone number. So they went to those coordinates, they called the number, and then all of a sudden they had drugs on board. And then they were told to drive, and they'll get a phone call and they'll be told, okay, now, pull into this gas station and walk away from your car and be gone for an hour and come back and you'll get paid. And so it's very insulated, very compartmentalized, because they continue to evolve and learn as the cops chase them and bust them. They just get better and better.
And is it mostly Mexico, Central America, South America, or have you come across people from other parts of the world as well?
It is all over the place now. It's all over the map. It shifts almost monthly, what they're seeing. So when you talk to your Border Patrol partners, because they're dealing with the majority of this, and when you talk to them like, hey, what are you seeing? And 1 month it'll be like, oh, dude, we're getting overrun with Hondurans. And then the next month, oh man, the Haitians are coming now. And then you'll get some African countries are showing up now. And now we have Chinese, or this month it's Turkey. So it's constantly shifting. And one of the things we hear constantly from those that are intercepted and processed is like, well, yeah, it's being advertised like it's kind of a known fact throughout the world that come to the southern border of the U.S. It's wide open and they're letting you in. And so like, oh my God.
Wow, man. Is that the, when you're thinking about future of law enforcement in your county, is that border be at the top of the list of things that that future sheriffs, deputy sheriffs, law enforcement in general are going to be dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we've seen an influx of human smuggling like we've never seen before. So that I don't see that problem going away anytime soon because it's going to be a very hard faucet to shut off.
Yeah,
So it's definitely going to be at the forefront.
man. And when you're thinking about law enforcement in the future and people that are coming in, are you thinking that over the last few years, a lot of people are reconsidering wanting to become law enforcement officers because of what they've seen on TV, or does that mean that recruits coming in aren't the same quality as maybe perhaps they would have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Is that something you think about, or is that an issue, or do you think, hey, it's going to drive people that just want to serve regardless of how they're treated by politicians or whatever the media's doing with the issue?
So we've definitely anybody that looks around and pays attention knows that recruiting and retaining police officers these days has become tougher, and I do think that it's because of the national narrative. If you pay attention to media outlets, they would lead you to believe that we're a bunch of evil bastards and we're raping and pillaging. And so when you have that message out there, and you see some of the stuff that cops have been subject to, uh, it makes it hard to recruit and retain. But I will say that one thing I have noticed generationally, right, just with people having done this work for 3 decades now, and looking at my generation of cops when I got in compared to the newer cops that are coming in now, is I strongly feel that this newer generation of cops, so the cops that we've seen over the past 5 years and up to current day coming into this profession, are more service minded than they ever have been.
Hmm.
And so they are more, and it's to their core, right? When I got in, you knew you had to answer certain questions. I want to serve the public. I want to do that. No, I really want to drive cars fast and I want to shoot guns. But I have to say all these things, right? And not that you didn't feel it, but that wasn't at the forefront of your thing. You wanted to do cool guy stuff. Uh, these young officers coming in now, they truly believe to their core, like, I want to make a difference. I want to be part of something bigger, and I want to make a difference in my overall world. And if that starts with just making a difference in my immediate community, then that's where I want to start. And so I think we're going to be fine. It's all ebb and flow. It comes and it goes, and it's cyclic. They love us, they hate us. They love us, they hate us. But I think what I will give credit for with these newer generations of cops is they are more technologically sound and savvy than I've ever seen in our career. And I think they're going to solve more problems with less violence that way. They are more service minded and are more family oriented than I've ever seen before. So I think they're going to be, just by proxy, going to be much more community oriented. And so I think you're going to see a shift in policing, where it does not look like it has traditionally looked. And you're going to have more community engagement and involvement than you've ever had in the past. And it's going to be more of a partnership. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good place to move towards. But I have hope, because I have a 15-year-old who wants to be a cop. And so I have hope that he'll have a much better career if he gets into this than I did.
Wow. And the book, was there a message that you wanted people to take from this when they go through your journey here in law enforcement, as you mentioned earlier, coming up on the twilight tour, I guess is what we call it in the military? Is there a message that you want people to take from this after they read it?
I think the big message is where I end the book, and it is just that we are all human beings in this together, and the only way we're going to solve our problems of the world is to be united as humans, treat each other with decency, and fight these problems together and fight evil together. We have to have each other's back. We have to stand together. You know as well as I do how divisive this world is right now, and I think that's by design. And so I think we have to come back to a place where we are good humans to each other. We forgive and we overlook, and we give some grace. And I think that would be my resounding message: is we have to do this together. We have to be united. And that's the only way we're going to beat evil.
And where's the best place for people to find more about you and where can they pick up the book that makes the most sense for you?
The easiest spot is going right to my website, which is onetimenation, all one word.com. And they can find out about me there. I've got my bio there. I've got a little cool guy video that, makes me look way cooler than I am. And then they can get the book there, and they can find the links to grab the book on all the platforms there as well.
Awesome. Love it, man. Well, thank you for writing this. And, but more than that, thank you for your decades of service holding a line and for your example. Those guys that are coming up in the department right now are lucky to have you. So stay safe out there, and thank you again for holding the line.
Appreciate it, brother, and I appreciate all that you've done for our country as well.
Awesome, man. Well, hopefully we'll see you in person soon.
Yes, sir.
All right. Later, brother. I've been a fan of Black Rifle Coffee Company since their inception. I love when veterans leave the military and pursue their passion. In this case, coffee. The coffee is fantastic, and as an added benefit, the company is built on quality, patriotism, and giving back to the veteran and first responder communities. I've been a subscriber to the BRCC Coffee Club for years and love it. My favorite is Silencer Smooth. It gets delivered every single month. The Black Rifle Coffee Club. Being part of the club gives you the power to elevate your coffee experience to the next level. The Black Rifle Coffee Club puts you in the driver's seat. You pick the texture and the roast you want, the frequency you want it delivered, and the quantity. You get to completely personalize your club orders, ensuring that your favorite coffee is sent to your door exactly how you want it, when you want it. Right now, Black Rifle Coffee is offering an exclusive opportunity for new Coffee Club members. Join today and enjoy 30% off your first order when you use the discount code DANGERCLOSE at checkout. That's right, 30% off just for being a part of our growing coffee community. Remember to use the discount code DANGERCLOSE at checkout. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. I want to start off with this cutting board right here from Donald Logue, and this is Frisson Logue Hardwoods in Shady Cove, Oregon. You'll recognize Donald Logue from films like Ranger Games, The Patriot, Sneakers. Awesome guy. He's been on the podcast before. He wrote Danny Trejo's autobiography with Danny Trejo. Both of them have been on the podcast, by the way. You can check that out from season 1. And this is a beautiful piece of wood right here. So check them out right here. Frisson Logue, that's FRISONLOGUE hardwoods.com. And that's custom milling, table slabs, live edge slabs right here, burl. Beautiful website here as well. So be sure and check them out. Once again, that's Frisson Logue, FRISONLOGUE hardwoods.com. Awesome. Donald, man, thank you so much. This is really cool. Man. Actually, I'm going to cook some steaks, cut them up on this tonight. Awesome. All right. Also, man, so if you've been following me for a while or you've read my books, you'll know that I'm a watch person. And this particular one right here, this is from the 80s, possibly early 90s, but Chronosport UDT timer. And if you're a fan of the Rambo films, you'll recognize this from Sylvester Stallone's wrist in Rambo 3. And anybody that got, let's say, Brigade Quartermaster magazine back in the day, these things were like, I think $350, I remember, from junior high and high school from Brigade Quartermaster. And that might as well have been $350 million back then. That was just out of reach. But love this watch right here. And Nick over at DC Vintage Watches tracked one down for me. I have one from a few years back, so I wanted to get another one because obviously they do not make these anymore. And I always love this watch, so check that out right there. So Nick over at DC Vintage Watches, be sure and go follow them, dcvintagewatches.com. But he added a little something special for me in this as well. We've gotten to know each other over the past year, and this Vietnam era Zippo right here. So this is from the 60s right here, and it says 1st Special Forces Group Airborne on it. So, man, that is really cool. That in and of itself would have been amazing. But this one came from the collection of a stuntman from Magnum PI. So I have a couple different things from the Magnum PI show now in the collection, because that was such an impactful show for me growing up. So Nick, thank you so much for this. Extremely thoughtful. And thank you so much for tracking down this Chronosport UDT timer right here. Absolutely love it. This is one I'm going to be wearing. A lot of times I don't wear some of these because I'm worried about smashing them up. But this is pretty cool. So thank you. I'll be wearing it. All right. What else? Eberly stock. So follow me on Instagram at Jack Carr USA. I wear a lot of Eberly stock. They branched out from packs, and we have 2 of the packs in the Amazon Prime video series adaptation of my first novel, The Terminal List. Chris Pratt wears 2 of their packs in that show. Glenn Eberly has been on the podcast before. You should follow him on Instagram as well. He is always flying through these canyons in Idaho. Really cool guy, former Olympian Air Force pilot, started Eberly stock, but they branched out into clothing, and I wore their base layers all ski season, and love their jackets. Rain gear I just wore on a river trip up in Idaho last week, where we got some pretty significant rain. This is their Cascade Performance hoodie that they just sent, so looking forward to rocking this thing soon. But check out Eberly stock, great company, great people, and Eberly stock, thank you so much for this. Sincerely appreciate it. All right. What to next? Interceptors, The Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartels by Matthew Thomas, just on the podcast. Be sure and go check out this book right here. 30 years in law enforcement down in Arizona on the border. So check that out. And Spyderco. So somebody gave me this Spyderco blade right here on book tour. Got a few different blades, some bottles of whiskey, some wine, a lot of honey, and I really appreciate it. Spyderco, this might have been one of my first blades like this, a model very similar back in, I want to say late 80s, early 90s. And what I like about Spyderco blades is that if you lose one, it's not going to break the bank. They've made more than one. So, rather than a custom knife downrange, I oftentimes would carry blades like this, so that if I did lose it in the chaos of combat, because it's just clipped in, I wouldn't lose my mind. So very cool. Check that out. Spyderco. And thank you to everybody on book tour who brought gifts, coins, patches from fire departments and police departments. And that stuff really means a lot to me, as does this. So thank you. And this right here. So this is a Smith & Wesson 45 ACP revolver. Thunder Ranch edition, has the rail on it right there. I did a course up at Thunder Ranch a few years back where I shot this. Everybody else in the course had auto-loading pistols, and I shot this and had an amazing time. I'd done a little bit of revolver work before I got in the military, a little bit when I got into the military, because we still had the Smith & Wesson 686 when I came in the late 90s. We also had the SIG P226 as well, but they still had those wheel guns, those stainless wheel guns for coming over the beach. And yeah, always wanted this particular one, but Smith & Wesson stopped making them years ago. But I did track one of these down, and Heidi Smith at Thunder Ranch tracked this down for me. And it's a very special one because of who it came from. But anyway, very cool. If you are a student of the gun, highly recommend you get out to Thunder Ranch, regardless of what you're shooting. But if you have a wheel gun in the arsenal, definitely get on the range with Clint Smith at Thunder Ranch. Awesome. Heidi, thank you. All right, what else? Black Rifle Coffee Company right here. Sticker Club. Oh, yeah. There's some very creative people working over there. Oh, that's solid. Like that. And this month's coffee right here, exclusive coffee subscription club. This is the Midnight Rider. Nice. Look at that. Oh, yeah. Get the 4 bangers right there. Look at that. Awesome. So thank you guys, Black Rifle Coffee. And it always comes with a sticker for that particular coffee right there, and different ways to make it right here. So very cool. Thank you guys. And this. So also, if you've been following me, you know I'm a watch guy. Yes, I'm a gun guy. And right here, Bastion. This just popped up in, I think it was an Instagram feed or something like that. I hadn't heard of them before, but I clicked on it, and they had this pen. I'm a pen person. This one right here use the Shipwreck pen. It's like a bolt action pen, and it's solid. So it just arrived. I'm always looking for cool new pens. And this one, see that? You can like patina on there. It's supposed to weather over time. And it's got some weight to it. This thing is a hefty pen. So that's from Bastion Pens right there. And I just liked the, because of what I'm writing about right now for book 7, I kind of liked that shipwreck theme to this pen. So that is that. All right. I think that is everything. Take care out there. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. To find out more about Matthew Thomas, be sure and follow him on Instagram at deputy_one-time and find his book, Interceptors, The Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartels at onetimenation.com. You can follow me on the social channels at Jack Carr USA. Officialjackcarr.com is the website. Click on shop in the upper right-hand corner for the merch. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until the next time, take care out there. Stay safe. Be strong. Keep fighting.